And that tells me that it's more probably about politics than the actual letter of the law. And I think that will help the situation if a mom has another alternative to raising it herself. To have a two-state solution, you have to have two sides that want that solution. You could start oil exploration to see what is there. That would be an issue that he would be addressing as president. Is there another shoe to drop, something we don't know about? And if not, then why is he gone? Democrats had to filibuster, and Republicans had to go nuclear on the Neil Gorsuch nomination. Look, this was the end game all along. This was always what was going to happen. The Democrats were always going to filibuster, and in part that's understandable because the Democrats feel like they got robbed when President Obama's nomination to replace Justice Scalia, Merrick Garland, was ignored by Republicans. They never brought it to even any hearings. They didn't bring it to a vote. They simply said in March of last year that they weren't going to hold any hearings and they were going to ignore the nomination. Democrats felt like that President Obama should reasonably get his choice at that point. That was in March. That was 8 months before the election in November, but it was in the midst of a presidential election year. It was a highly emotional time and political time, as you may recall. And there was really a lot of precedence for what the Republicans were doing in that there really had never been a nominee to the Supreme Court in the midst of an election, presidential election cycle. And in fact, and this is really important to remember, this is what might be called the Biden rule. In 1992, then Senator Joe Biden, who was President Obama's vice president, urged Democrats to do this very thing, not vote on a nomination by President George H.W. Bush at that time, in order to push it off until after the election in hopes that Bill Clinton would be able to make an appointment. And the only reason that didn't happen is because the opportunity did not come up. It appears, though, that was going to be an opportunity, but it didn't come up. There's no doubt they would have done that. Biden was a leader in the party, and kind of a mainstream leader. He wasn't a radical or anything. It wasn't Bernie Sanders. He was a leader in the party. He was advocating for that. There's little doubt that that's exactly what was going to happen there. So let's put a pin in that point, if you will, and come back to it in a moment, because it's important. Now, conventional wisdom is that the Democrats have made a huge mistake by doing this, a huge tactical mistake, because Justice Scalia was a conservative court justice, and Justice Gorsuch here will be a conservative court justice. So, in a sense, this was replacing a conservative with a conservative, and that was keeping the court balanced the way it is, which is essentially you have 4 conservatives, you have 4 liberals, and you have 1 swing vote, Justice Kennedy, who was naturally enough nominated and put in office by a Republican president. So it's not totally unreasonable to see why Democrats are a little bit hopped up over the fact that they never got to vote on that, which we pointed out. It's also true that they may have made a tactical mistake on it. You know, at this point now they have no weapons. So the problem is for them, and this is again the conventional wisdom, and there's truth to it. The problem is that they did not now leave themselves any weapons in the next nomination. So let's say one of the liberal justices passes away or retires or for some other reason steps down and there's an opening. And that can be filled by President Trump. Let's say it happens in the next 12 months. So it's not in the midst of an election cycle. That one will change the balance of the court. There wasn't a lot of public support, broadly speaking, by the American people for the Democrats to filibuster this nomination. They might have had a lot more then. That's probably true. And in this sense, conventional wisdom, I think, has it right. The Democrats used up a weapon that was useless at this point and is now not available to them next time. So that's true. However, there's a lot more to it than that. I don't think they had any choice. The Democrat base is exercised in such a way that is unprecedented. They are hyperbolic in a way that we have rarely seen in this country since practically the time when there were canings of senators on the Senate floor before the Civil War. You just don't see that anymore. And so because of that, the Democrat leadership was being pushed and pushed and pushed to fight bare knuckle at every step. And here's why the Democrats are so exercised and so sort of off the cliff right now. You have sort of a triumvirate. Trump won, and that's Donald Trump. And that alone is driving them crazy because he's such an unusual president, and he governs, he's going to govern in an unusual way. His personality is very off-putting to those who don't kind of agree with his policies and whatnot. And he's got a lot of rough spots. There's no doubt about it. Number two, the first female president was going to be elected, and she wasn't. And number three, she got the majority of the popular vote. So what you have here are the three big things working together. Trump, of all people, won. Hillary Clinton, the first woman president, lost, but she got the majority of the vote. So craziness has ensued, loss of mind has ensued, rational thought has ensued, or irrational thought has ensued, and what we're seeing is coming out because of that. So you, in a sense, what you have now is the demonstrations and the riots and that sort of thing has left the Democrat leadership with few choices. Given that, it's important to understand that what they've done here is not about Neil Gorsuch or even the next nominee. It's about 2018. And it's about 2018 for the Republicans too. The Democrats had to filibuster because of 2018, because if they didn't, there was a very good chance that some of them would be primaried by those very unhappy with them in their party. And they were probably going to end up with a demoralized base, an unmotivated base. Democrats in swing states particularly rely heavily on turnout. A demotivated base is not going to have turnout, and that's going to be very bad for Democrats. So the filibuster attempt here, which was always going to be useless and probably a tactical mistake, had to be done because of the 2018 election cycle. That's the exact same case for Republicans. If they had allowed a successful filibuster by the Democrats, the Republican base would have responded in similar fashion as the Democrat base might have. It's not as bonkers at this point, because I don't know that it could possibly be as bonkers at this point, but there probably would have been primary candidates, and there would have been real anger at the Republicans because a lot of the base feels like they've been pushed around in Washington by Democrats for a lot of years, and they're frankly sick of it. So in a sense, this was all been driven by Americans and grassroots Americans, really, on the left and on the right, but not evenly. Not evenly. The Democrats' response to the 2016 election is so unprecedented as to be almost impossible for many people on the right to understand. But it is part of what's driving the Republican response. So you have the triumvirate of things in 2016 that resulted in this crazy Democrat response that is now resulting in a very virulent Republican and Trump supporter response. You see the sequence of events here that have happened. I think a reasonable question that a lot of people have now and worry about is this going to come back to bite the Republicans? I say no, not at all. And the reason it's not is because the Democrats would have done this anyway. The Democrats were always going to do the nuclear option. The next opportunity they got, whether it was their guy or not, if they were in charge of the Senate, they were always going to exercise the nuclear option and change the rules from a 60-vote standard, as Senator Schumer likes to call it now, although it was only started in 2003. That's a pretty recent standard by American standards. They were always going to change it to a majority 51. And how do I know this? Because they've already done it. It's called the Reid Rule. In 2013, Senator Harry Reid, then the leader of the Senate, changed the rules because Republicans were blocking President Obama's appointees to the lower federal courts, particularly the D.C. court, which had several openings, and Obama had nominated nobody that was consensus type person, nobody that was going to get 60 votes, that's for sure. Republicans were blocking those, and so Senator Harry Reid changed the rules so it would only require 51. That's the nuclear option. That's the exact same thing the Republicans just did for the court up, the Supreme Court. So the Democrats were going to do that all along. There was never any chance that they wouldn't. There was zero to be gained by the Republicans for not doing it right now. If they had chose to take the high road and to restore the Senate rules that are so important, and also, by the way, not related to the Constitution anyway, these are just Senate rules. If they had chosen to do that, they would not have gotten Gorsuch. There would have been a huge problem. Their base would have been incensed at it, and the Democrats wouldn't have changed anything except they would have changed the rules at their point. There was zero to be gained, and everybody knew that was watching this closely and understood these dynamics that I'm walking through. So the Republicans were forced to. The Democrats had to filibuster. They had to because of their base. And the Republicans had to go nuclear. They had to because of their base. We take a much more in-depth look at Senator Schumer and explaining why his position on this particular point is fairly fraudulent at the Revolutionary Act. Look at the link below and you'll see a link to the Revolutionary Act where we blog about this. And also, take a look at our site, at our YouTube site here. And if you think you might like this video and many others, please subscribe to us because we're going to load this thing up for bear.